This is Liz Russell-Arnott, Iterative Development 2, Week 11 submission, and this is my voice component. I want to start by saying I've really enjoyed doing this project, and I can't tell you how much I've learnt, and I think how much more confident I've become of using what I know by doing this project. It's been a pretty huge concept, I must admit, and the comment was made more than once that it was a very, very broad scope or a very large project. I have pruned it back. There was a lot of wisdom in the comments that were made in that, and it has been pruned back to a much more manageable size. Though it's still large, I think it's quite achievable. It's gaining some momentum. I think in the concept, it still remains the same. It's around environment and art and how we can work together as organisations in the community and as people through using art to actually create awareness and come up with ideas and hopefully making positive changes. And I'm really not on my own in this. The more research I do, the more information I find, but more hearteningly, the more people I find that are engaged in the same, I suppose, struggle would be a word that we could use. We've got a world that's filling up with garbage, and my belief is we need to ask for less and reuse more. And this whole project has been designed with that in mind. And as a practicing artist, that is, I feel, the artistic voice is the last unedited bastion for telling the truth and for telling truths and getting messages out to the public about how we feel about the world we live in and what's happening in it. There's all sorts of things we can talk about with that. So that is the framework that I'm using for my project. Now, I had decided to prune the artists back, but all of a sudden I had a flood of artists come in. And I'm quite happy to take on the extra artists and go back up to 6. I think I started with 6 and 6 locations. I've pulled the locations back to 3 maximum. I have 2 confirmed locations, and one is a very large public market where they get, in the spring and summer months, thousands and thousands of people, and it's at a place called Evandale in Tasmania, and it's where they hold the Glover exhibition. It's a very well-known location. I do actually have artworks at that location that are installed at the gateway, the etched rubbing plates. So it's sort of a bit, like home week for me, which is nice to go back there and have a bit more input. We'll have 6 artists, each with a 44-gallon drum, which are in the middle of being prepared at the moment. Those drums, each artist will be given one, and they will decorate it according to their own concepts around how they want to work with environmental or art that talks about recycling. One artist has suggested she actually wants to use weeds that have been pulled fresh from the garden to create an artwork with the drums. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see what people are actually wanting to do. And that's introduced weeds. That's not just a plant from the bush that a farmer has decided he doesn't want anymore. I don't have the last artist's mediums yet, but that is to come soon. Now, moving on to the next section. So I think the content is pretty much set now. Probably 5 to 6 artists and 2 absolutely confirmed locations, and 1 location that I'm still waiting. I did have meetings, and I should have known by now about that one, but the person involved had some family illness and had to cancel 2 meetings. So that's rescheduled for next week. Anthropocene art is something that is really part of the foundation of this, which is, for those who do not know, it is something that was coined by a chemist called Paul Crutzen. He's a Dutch chemist. He actually became a Nobel Prize winner. and he used the term Anthropocene to describe what he calls the age of the effect of man on the geology of the planet. And I feel my work sits very, very comfortably inside that description. But it also, and as was suggested, that my art is also somewhere between relational or socially engaged art and the arts of the Anthropocene. I think it bridges across both, so it's interesting to explore. And there's a lot of work being done in this area now, which is becoming quite fascinating. Um, I really want to facilitate ongoing dialogue, heighten public awareness, get people engaged in positive ideas around other things that they could do using art um, to benefit their part of community. And so I see this project as a way of engaging people in those conversations and beginning the conversation, and through the demonstration of the techniques that we're using, it will enthuse them to move on and explore it further and maybe embrace it into their lifestyles, both in their businesses and personally. Um, there's a lot of debate about the value of art, and I think the value of art, um, there was now, what was that lady's name again? Her name, I'm just looking for it here. I think I might have to stop my thing. No, I won't. I'll keep it going. She actually developed a chart and divided art into a framework where she said it had two benefits, and one's instrumental and one is personal. And so it was sort of, there's a public benefit and a private benefit. One's social capital and one's more emotional. And so it was about these bridges between the financial and the personal feelings about art. And I found that really fascinating because sometimes, and I know people come up with really good ideas and good community art collaborative projects, and they become so successful that someone takes it over and starts to make rules about it, and it becomes all about the money and very little about the art after a while. And so they start dying off again. And where do we intervene? And, I'm quite fascinated in looking at where we can keep it or stop the intervention at the point where it can be engaged by people and organisations, but not get lost in bureaucracy, I suppose. Economic benefits really for these projects are really, they are important. I'm not going to downplay them, but we can encourage recycling, but only to the point of safety um, for handling. And this is something that I've also included in the project, is actually this safety around the medium. I personally am working with plastics and recycled papers. There are some papers you can't use because of the BPAs. Some I would never recycle are receipts that come out of a cash register. They're very, very toxic with chemicals, and they will release through the skin on touch. So an important part of what I'm doing with the recycling with the materials I'm using is actually to educate the public on the dangers of some of the materials so that they know what to try and use, or if they want to use it, how to handle it effectively, so that they're taken care of, not only them but the people who might want to engage with the artworks. I've got Longford Waste and Transfer Station is one of my sites, and I'm quite excited about it because the people who are managing it as a business are creating, as a result of what we've been discussing in our meetings around the project, have actually commenced creating artworks at the Waste and Transfer Station in preparation for the event. So that's really exciting. They've embraced it completely. They can only see positive benefits coming out of it for everybody that is involved, including the public. So that's exciting. So that's the second location. Third location could be either a Bunnings store or a Rotary Community Service Organisation event. More details on that later. My sponsors are still in place: Longford Waste and Transfer Station, Le Cafe, Devil's Bakehouse, Dick Adams, the politician, has offered to do all my printing. Longford's Men's Shed, very exciting, cutting my 44-gallon drums, hinging the doors, fixing locks to them, ready to present them to the artists to decorate. So they'll be fully lockable units where the artists can store their artwork inside the decorated 44-gallon drum, and they will be transported from site to site. And I'm giving the drums to the artists. They are going to keep them. But they've also said they'd like to be involved in further development of the project, maybe as a big community project travelling next year, so we might look at applying for some funding for that. Thanks to this project, I will have all the groundwork done and ready to apply for the funding, so that's quite exciting as well. The target audience, as is obvious, is the community at large. I've done a lot of research on this. There are artists around Australia and around the world who are, and I think the movement's growing and growing, and there's a lot of artists who aren't talking about the medium as refuse and recycled materials anymore. They're just using them because they're available. And they're moving from, I think they're helping to change, that's helping to change the perception of it as being rubbish. And I think we have to stop talking about the materials or the media as being rubbish, because if it's wanted by somebody and going to be used to create art, it is no longer an unwanted or dirty material, and the mindset can be changed around that. I think that's important if we're going to have really good pieces of art accepted as fine art and good quality art that investors will want to actually put money into and buy, so that the artists can buy their bread and butter. My examples haven't changed. The disciplines are quite broad. I'll just to run through a few of them. Cross-disciplinary art and design, project management, society and the arts, waste management, economics or finances, creative arts, health, environment, and also history and culture. Are just, the list could be endless, but I've just pulled out some of the more important ones. There's a big list of skills that I'll just read out a couple. Visual language and spatial perception. So communicating the project through appropriate visual language and demonstrating spatial perception through appropriate design and display. Design and construction. Communicate ideas to the public for how techniques can be transferred. That is all on the paper, so I'm not going to read it all out. So knowledge, I think, knowledge for me, the knowledge I need to acquire and have been acquiring to complete the project, very importantly, and this was my weak point, was marketing, advertising and promotion. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because I didn't have the confidence through practical experience to put it into practice. And I think this has been one of the biggest things that's benefited me out of this project, was actually getting that confidence to put what I know into action. But I've learnt so much from the other students. It's just been fantastic. And from the lectures. I've really enjoyed these lectures. I think the further I get into this particular course, the more excited I'm getting about it. It was sort of a bit daunting at first, but now that I have the language behind me, it's becoming far more interesting and exciting. I'm going to create a website and a Facebook page just with basic information on it, so that it's there for people who want to make inquiries and learn further. So I'll put all the health and safety information about the plastics on that website. I think one of the important things with the materials that are going to be used, that it's very important that there's rules or guidelines put in place for the artists around the use of toxic materials, and just making sure that they're aware of what their recycled materials contain before they actually allow the public to touch them and use them, and have a go at the artwork, in making some artwork themselves. Plastics are one of them, but there are other people who like to paint in sump oil and things like that, so we have to be very careful.